What is type 2 diabetes? Diabetes is a condition in which there is a high level of glucose within the blood. And to demonstrate the difference between a normal blood glucose and the blood glucose of a diabetic, I have here a container with 5 litres of water within it. 5 litres is the volume of blood that circulates around our body. I've got a container here of glucose, and if I add just 1 teaspoonful of glucose to this container, we have a concentration of glucose which is very similar to that of myself. I don't have diabetes. I have approximately 1 teaspoonful of glucose circulating around the entire volume of blood in my body. Now, if I were diabetic, it would only take another teaspoonful of glucose in my blood, and now I'm diabetic. So as you can see, the difference between a normal blood glucose and that of a diabetic is not very much. Type 2 diabetes is a condition in which the pancreas, in the early stages certainly, is unable to control the blood glucose level. It's producing insulin, and in fact in the early stages of type 2 diabetes, the pancreas produces large amounts of insulin, and despite that, the body is unable to control the blood glucose level, keep it right down to 1 teaspoonful. The person is diabetic. This is in contradistinction to type 1 diabetes, a condition which is actually quite rare. Only 1 in 10 diabetics are suffering from type 1 diabetes. Most diabetics in this country have type 2 diabetes. So how do we diagnose diabetes? If I had diabetes, how would I know? Well, I might have symptoms. Symptoms of thirst, frequent passing of urine, I might be losing weight. But actually in type 2 diabetics, that's relatively uncommon. Those are features that actually present in type 1 diabetics. Type 2 diabetics often have no symptoms at all. Often type 2 diabetics are discovered for the first time because of a blood test. Now there are 3 sorts of blood tests that we do to check for diabetes. The first is a fasting blood glucose level. Excuse me. So a fasting blood glucose level is often done first thing in the morning. The person hasn't had anything to eat or drink except water for 8 hours, and they have a fasting blood glucose level. If you haven't had anything to eat or drink for 8 hours, we would expect the blood glucose level to be quite low. And certainly if it's more than a teaspoonful, that would be a feature of diabetes. The other way of checking for diabetes is to actually do what's called an oral glucose tolerance test. This is a test in which the person is challenged with glucose. They have to drink a solution containing 75 grams of glucose, and then their blood glucose level is measured in response to that. Now, a normal person will have, or a person without diabetes, will have a low fasting blood glucose level. They're then given 75 grams of glucose in a drink. They have to drink it quite quickly, and then 2 hours later they have another blood glucose level. Now, 75 grams of glucose is a lot. It's a lot of teaspoonfuls of glucose. It's, let me see, it's 15 teaspoonfuls of glucose. And within 2 hours, the body has to store and distribute that so that the remaining level of glucose in the blood is just down to 1 teaspoonful. People with type 2 diabetes have difficulty disposing and metabolizing glucose. So at 2 hours, their blood glucose level is high, about 2 teaspoonfuls. So those are the 2 ways common ways of diagnosing diabetes: a fasting blood glucose and a 2-hour glucose after 75 grams of glucose. The third way is what's called an HbA1c. Now, This is a test in which the amount of glucose which is bound to hemoglobin is measured. And it gives a measure of the average level of glucose in the blood over 3 months. The features or the advantages of a HbA1c is that when you have the blood test, you don't need to fast. The other feature of it is that because it's measuring the average blood glucose level over 3 months, it gives an idea of how much carbohydrate or glucose or sugar one is eating, and it also gives an idea of how the body is dealing with that glucose and how well it is at keeping the blood glucose level normal in relation to one's diet. So it's a very good test in my opinion. I tend to have an HbA1c twice a year, and I've just had one and I'm waiting for the results. So that's what type 2 diabetes is. It's a condition in which there's a high blood glucose level, about 2 teaspoonfuls in the blood. It's a condition in which the pancreas continues to make insulin, and indeed in the early stages of the condition it produces very large amounts of insulin, and this is insulin resistance, and it's diagnosed, type 2 diabetes is diagnosed with a blood test, fasting blood glucose, an oral glucose tolerance test, or an HbA1c.